The air was biting cold, with gusts of icy wind slicing through the bustling streets of Cleveland, Ohio. On a busy corner, people hurried past, deliberately avoiding the eyes of those less fortunate. Nathan, a man in his early 50s, sat huddled with a weathered cardboard sign that read in shaky handwriting, "Anything helps. God bless." His face bore deep lines etched not only by age but by years of hardship. Nathan's weary eyes reflected emptiness, tinged with a faint glimmer of fragile hope. His thin coat did little to fend off the bone-chilling cold, and his trembling hands rubbed together in a desperate attempt to capture some warmth. Around him, the world moved as though he were invisible. Hundreds of feet passed by, not one pausing. The polished shoes and hurried footsteps on the pavement reminded Nathan of a life he once had, a life now confined to memories. He tried to offer a faint smile, as if clinging to the last shred of his dignity, but inside, he felt hollow. Then, out of nowhere, a pair of pristine white sneakers stopped in front of him. These were not the usual shoes he saw. These were immaculate, expensive, and belonged to someone very young. Nathan lifted his gaze, his eyes narrowing slightly against the glare of the winter sun. Before him stood Barron Trump, a tall teenager with a composed demeanor that seemed out of place amidst the chaos of the city. A strange wave of emotion surged through Nathan. He felt awkward and hesitant, yet a flicker of hope stirred within him. For the first time that day, someone had actually stopped and noticed him. His voice, hoarse from the cold and years of neglect, trembled as he spoke. "Could you spare $1?" Barron didn't reply immediately. The teenager looked at Nathan, his gaze devoid of pity, but filled with a rare and sincere concern. It was as if time slowed down, the city's cacophony fading into silence. Barron's piercing eyes seemed to delve into Nathan's soul, seeking something deeper than his outward appearance. Finally, Barron spoke, his voice warm but steady. "What do you need it for?" The question caught Nathan off guard. It had been so long since anyone had asked him anything with genuine interest. He swallowed hard, his throat tightening with emotion. "A cup of coffee. Maybe a sandwich if I'm lucky," Nathan stammered. His voice trailed off, as though even his modest request felt too much to ask. Barron nodded quietly, his calm presence making Nathan feel seen, not as a beggar, but as a fellow human being. "How long have you been out here?" Barron asked, his tone gentle but purposeful. Nathan lowered his head, his shoulders trembling slightly. "Over a year," he admitted, his voice barely audible against the cold wind. "I lost my job when the factory shut down. Then my health started failing. I couldn't keep up with rent, and here I am." Barron listened intently, his blue eyes glinting with a profound empathy. He didn't interrupt or glance away like so many others. Nathan could feel it. The boy truly cared. For the first time in what felt like forever, Nathan felt visible. "What about your family?" Barron pressed gently, as though piecing together a puzzle. Nathan looked down, his voice breaking as he answered, "I don't have anyone left. My parents passed away years ago. I have a younger brother, but we haven't spoken in years." He paused, letting out a bitter chuckle. "I guess he's forgotten me by now." The weight of his words lingered in the air, yet Barron's unwavering presence offered a subtle, unspoken comfort. It was a moment Nathan would never forget, a moment where he no longer felt invisible. Nathan's words faded into the cold winter air, leaving a heavy silence between two people from vastly different worlds. Yet Barron's gaze remained steady, fixed on Nathan. The teenager slipped his hands into his coat pockets, as if weighing a decision. Nathan watched intently, thinking the conversation had come to an end, and Barron, like everyone else, would walk away. But Barron stayed. And then, he did something that Nathan could never have expected, something that would change his life forever. Barron stood quietly for a moment, his hand still buried in his pocket. Nathan's emotions surged, a blend of hope and apprehension. He thought surely the boy would leave, just like everyone else. But then Barron pulled his hand out, and what he did next left Nathan utterly speechless. In Barron's hand was not a coin, nor a single dollar bill, but a crisp, pristine $100 bill. Its edges gleamed faintly in the pale winter light, cutting through the harsh cold of the morning. Nathan stared at it, his eyes wide in disbelief. "Here," Barron said, his voice steady but without arrogance. "This isn't just for a coffee or a sandwich. This is for your tomorrow, to help you start again." Nathan froze, unsure of how to respond. His trembling hands were no longer just a reaction to the cold. They were a reflection of the emotions swelling within him. I can't take this," Nathan stammered, tears welling in his eyes. "I don't deserve it." Barron shook his head firmly, placing the bill into Nathan's hand with a decisive, yet gentle motion. "You do deserve it," Barron said, his eyes locked on Nathan's. "But there's one condition. If I help you today, you have to help yourself tomorrow. That's the deal." Those words pierced Nathan's heart. He couldn't stop the tears that quietly streamed down his face. For the first time in years, he felt seen, validated as a person, not as an invisible soul on the margins of society. "I promise," Nathan said, his voice raspy and filled with emotion. "I'll try." Barron offered a small, encouraging smile, then reached into his pocket again, pulling out a small notepad. He scribbled something on a piece of paper and handed it to Nathan. "This is the address for Hope Outreach," Barron explained. "Go there tomorrow morning. Tell them I sent you. They'll help you get back on your feet. They have everything you need, a place to stay, job support, and a way to start over." Nathan looked down at the paper, the handwriting precise and deliberate, just like Barron's words. It wasn't just an address. It was a lifeline, a chance to step out of the darkness that had consumed his life for so long. "But why are you doing this?" Nathan asked, his voice thick with emotion. "You don't know me. You don't owe me anything." Barron met Nathan's gaze, his eyes brimming with sincerity. "Because I can," he replied, "and because you deserve a chance to start again. Don't waste it." As their conversation continued, a small crowd began to gather. Some paused to watch, others pulled out their phones to take pictures or videos, but Barron paid them no mind. He placed a firm hand on Nathan's shoulder, crouching slightly to meet his eyes once more. "Keep your promise," Barron said softly but with conviction. "Tomorrow is yours. Don't let it slip away." Nathan watched as Barron straightened up and walked away, blending into the bustling crowd. In his hand, Nathan held the $100 bill and the piece of paper, both of which now felt like tiny flames of hope in his otherwise cold and desolate world. For the first time in years, his heart swelled, not with despair, but with gratitude, emotion, and above all, hope. Nathan sat in stunned silence long after Barron had walked away. Overwhelmed and speechless, he held tightly onto the $100 bill and the small piece of paper, clutching them as if they were the last lifeline pulling him out of the darkness. In all his years living on the streets, he had never encountered someone like Barron, a teenager who not only offered help, but also gave him something far more valuable: belief. Belief that change was possible. The memory of Barron's steady gaze and earnest words echoed in Nathan's mind. "Tomorrow is yours. Don't let it slip away." For years, Nathan had made countless promises to himself to turn things around, only to see hope crushed time and again. But this time, something felt different. Barron's sincerity carried a weight that was impossible to ignore. The next morning, as the first rays of sunlight broke through the skyline, Nathan made his decision. He stood, brushing the dust off his tattered coat, and tucked the $100 bill and the paper with the address securely into his pocket. His legs, accustomed to trudging through endless cold streets, felt heavier than usual. With each step, doubt crept in. He'd walked countless times before with hope, only to return with disappointment. But today, he forced himself to move forward. After what felt like an eternity, Nathan arrived at the Hope Outreach Resource Center. It was a modest building, its simple sign quietly reassuring. Standing at the entrance, Nathan hesitated. Do I even have the courage to walk in? He thought. But once again, Barron's words echoed in his mind. Tomorrow is yours. Drawing a deep breath, Nathan pushed open the glass door. Inside, warmth enveloped him, a stark contrast to the biting cold outside. The faint smell of coffee lingered in the air, and soft voices murmured from nearby rooms. For a moment, Nathan felt as though he'd stepped into another world. Behind the reception desk stood a middle-aged woman with a kind smile that reached her eyes. "Good morning," she said warmly. "How can I help you?" Nathan hesitated, fumbling to retrieve the small note from his pocket. His hands trembled as he handed it to her. "Barron Trump. He sent me here," Nathan said, his voice barely above a whisper. The woman's eyes lit up as she read the note, and her smile widened. "We've been expecting you," she said. "Come on in. Let's get started." Nathan was led to a small, cozy room where a social worker waited for him. The man's calm demeanor and understanding gaze put Nathan at ease. "We're here to help you," the social worker said gently. "Why don't you tell me a bit about your story? Together, we'll figure out how to get you back on your feet." Nathan sat with his hands clasped tightly, taking a moment to steady himself. Slowly, he began to speak. He told of the years he had spent working hard in a factory, of losing his job when it shut down, of how his health deteriorated and his home slipped away. He spoke of the endless nights spent on the streets, battling cold and hunger, while carrying the weight of despair. The social worker listened intently, never interrupting. His empathetic expression conveyed genuine understanding, something Nathan had rarely encountered in years. After Nathan finished, the man leaned forward and said, "Think of this as the beginning, not the end." Those words mirrored Barron's encouragement, reigniting the flicker of determination within Nathan. Within hours, Nathan was introduced to the support systems the center offered. They arranged for him to stay in a warm, temporary shelter, scheduled a health checkup, and enrolled him in a job training program. Each step felt like a dream. Too fast, too generous. Nathan could hardly believe what was happening. That evening, Nathan lay on a clean bed in the shelter, staring at the ceiling above him. The chill of the streets was replaced by a comforting stillness. He reached into his pocket and pulled out Barron's note, holding it tightly. It wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a reminder that hope still existed and that someone had seen value in him when he couldn't see it in himself. Tears welled in his eyes, not of sadness, but of release. For the first time in years, Nathan allowed himself to believe. Quietly, he whispered into the night, "I won't let him down. I won't let myself down." And with that, Nathan began his journey of rediscovery. One small step at a time. That night, as Nathan lay on the clean bed in the shelter, his mind was awash with emotions. The biting wind and the fear of being startled awake by unfamiliar footsteps were replaced by a profound stillness. It was a quiet unlike anything he had experienced in years. A quiet that wrapped around him like a warm embrace. Staring up at the ceiling, tears silently rolled down his cheeks. They were not tears of pain, but of release. An overwhelming sense of freedom from the burden he had carried for so long. It was a feeling he had thought lost forever. He whispered softly, as if making a promise to himself, or perhaps to someone who believed in him. "I won't let him down. I won't let myself down." For the first time in years, Nathan felt like he could do it. The road ahead was daunting, but he knew he had taken the first step, and all of it had started with a seemingly random encounter, one that was anything but random. In his heart, Barron wasn't just a teenager. He was the spark that had reignited the flame of hope within him. As Nathan walked through the doors of the Hope Outreach Resource Center the next morning, the warmth of the interior enveloped him. It was a stark contrast to the icy chill outside. The scent of freshly brewed coffee lingered in the air, and the murmur of soft voices drifted from nearby rooms. This wasn't just a building. It was a gateway to a world of possibilities Nathan had long thought out of reach. Behind the reception desk stood a middle-aged woman with a kind smile that reached her eyes. "Good morning," she said warmly. "How can I help you?" Nathan hesitated, his hands trembling slightly as he reached into his pocket to retrieve the small note. Carefully, he handed it to her. "Barron Trump sent me here," he said, his voice hoarse with nervousness and emotion. The woman glanced at the note, her eyes lighting up with recognition. Her smile grew even warmer. "We've been expecting you," she said gently. "Come with me, and we'll get started right away." Nathan was led to a small, cozy room where a young social worker awaited him. The man's demeanor was calm and patient, his kind eyes radiating reassurance. "We're here to help you," the social worker said with a steady but gentle voice. "Why don't you tell me your story? Don't worry, there's no judgment here." For the first time in years, Nathan felt a sense of safety, enough to open up. Slowly, he began to recount his life. He spoke of the long days working hard at the factory, losing his job when it shut down, his declining health, and the downward spiral that eventually left him homeless. His voice was raspy, but every word felt like a piece of the weight lifting off his shoulders. The social worker listened intently, never interrupting, his empathetic gaze offering a kind of comfort Nathan hadn't felt in years. When Nathan finished, the social worker leaned forward slightly. "Your story is not the end. It's the beginning," he said firmly yet kindly. "Think of this as your opportunity to start again, and we'll be here to walk that journey with you." After their conversation, Nathan was introduced to the resources the center offered. They provided him with a temporary place to stay in a warm, clean shelter, scheduled a health checkup to address long-ignored issues, and even enrolled him in a job training program. Everything happened so quickly, Nathan could barely process it all. It felt almost unreal, as though he were dreaming. But as he lay down in the quiet safety of the shelter that night, Nathan allowed himself to believe, for the first time in years, that this was real. Holding on to Barron's note like a talisman, he silently vowed to honor the faith that had been placed in him. And with that thought, Nathan prepared himself for the road ahead, determined to rebuild his life one step at a time. That night, Nathan lay on the bed in his temporary shelter. He felt the softness of the mattress beneath him, the howling wind outside unable to reach him anymore. His eyes gazed at the ceiling, his heart filled with a sense of safety he hadn't felt in years. In his hand, he clutched the small note Barron had given him, a tangible reminder that everything he had today started with one small but profoundly meaningful gesture. Silent tears rolled down his cheeks, not tears of sorrow, but tears of rediscovered faith. For the first time in years, he believed again. In the stillness of the room, Nathan whispered a quiet vow, a promise not only to Barron but also to himself. "I won't let him down. I won't let myself fall again." And in that moment, Nathan's journey of renewal truly began. Nathan sat in the community room of the center, his eyes watching people as they came and went. The space was filled with stories much like his own. People who had lost everything but were slowly finding hope again through the kindness of others. But today, Nathan felt something stronger than fragile optimism. It was determination. "Are you ready for your training session this morning?" Linda, the receptionist who had first welcomed Nathan to the center, asked with her ever-present smile. Nathan nodded. "More ready than I've ever been," he replied, a newfound brightness in his eyes. He stood, adjusting the simple coat the center had given him, a coat that wasn't fancy, but warm enough to shield him from the cold. Every step he took out of his small room felt like an affirmation. He was no longer the Nathan of yesterday. The training session took place in a small meeting room at the center. Nathan was taught basic computer skills, how to prepare a resume, and even participated in mock interviews. Though it wasn't always easy, especially learning new things at his age, he refused to give up. During one mock interview, a staff member looked Nathan in the eye and said, "We're not looking for perfection. We're looking for perseverance, and you've got plenty of that." Those words struck a chord within Nathan. He realized that while age might not be on his side, determination was his greatest asset. While Nathan focused on rebuilding his life, the story of his encounter with Barron was quietly spreading beyond the walls of the center. A passerby had recorded the moment Barron handed Nathan the $100 bill and the note. The video quickly went viral, gaining millions of views within days. In the clip, Barron was seen crouching down to meet Nathan at eye level, handing him the money with a look of genuine sincerity. The moment struck a chord with viewers, flooding social media with hashtags like #WoKindnessChallenge and #WoHopeRestored. One user commented, "Kindness doesn't need conditions. This young man showed us how a small act can transform a life." Another wrote, "This is how privilege should be used, with purpose and compassion." But what stood out most was Barron's silence. He declined all interview requests, made no public statements, and quietly donated a substantial sum to the Hope Outreach Resource Center. For Barron, it wasn't about recognition. It was about proving that genuine kindness didn't need applause. For Nathan, the story was not about the viral video or the attention it garnered. It was about the small, steady steps he was taking to rebuild his life. Each session at the center, each skill learned, and each milestone reached reminded him of Barron's unwavering belief in him. That belief had lit a fire within Nathan, a fire he intended to keep burning. As he reflected on how far he'd come in such a short time, Nathan knew one thing for certain. The journey wasn't over. But for the first time in years, he was walking forward, not alone, but with the strength and hope that kindness had given him. One afternoon, as Nathan sat in a training session diligently taking notes, Linda walked in holding a small package. "Nathan, this is for you," she said, her warm smile unable to hide her excitement. Nathan opened the package with trembling hands. Inside was a brand new coat, a greeting card, and a short letter. The letter read, "Nathan, I know you can do it. This is just the beginning. Keep moving forward. Not just for yourself, but for the countless others who will be inspired by your story. I believe in you. Barron." Nathan's hands shook, not from the cold, but from overwhelming emotion. Folding the letter carefully, he placed it over his heart. "Thank you, Barron," he whispered, his voice filled with gratitude. "Thank you for not only seeing me, but for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself." The video of Nathan and Barron's interaction had gone viral, but its impact extended far beyond social media. Donations began pouring into the Hope Outreach Resource Center, enabling them to expand their programs and help more people like Nathan. A local entrepreneur even stepped forward to sponsor the construction of additional temporary housing units. For Nathan, this wasn't just about his own transformation. It was an opportunity to become a role model. New arrivals at the center, often bearing the same weary and defeated expressions he once wore, began seeking him out for encouragement. Nathan didn't just tell them his story. He spoke from his heart. "If I can rebuild my life, so can you," he would say, offering hope to those who needed it most. That evening, Nathan sat by the window in the shelter, staring at the distant streetlights. A deep sense of pride swelled in his chest. From a man drowning in despair, he had rediscovered hope. And now, he had the chance to pass it on to others. In the stillness of the night, Nathan whispered, almost to himself, but also as a message to Barron, "You changed my life. Now it's my turn to change someone else's." As time passed, Nathan evolved from someone receiving help to a cornerstone of the Hope Outreach Resource Center. Step by step, he rebuilt his life, becoming an invaluable part of the team. Today, Nathan is a counselor at the center, guiding others who face struggles similar to his own. His work isn't just meaningful. It's his way of paying forward the kindness that had once lifted him. One quiet evening, as Nathan was tidying up paperwork in his small office, a knock came at the door. He looked up to see a familiar figure standing there, his face etched with emotion. "Nathan, is it really you?" a trembling voice asked. Nathan froze in place. Before him stood Paul, the younger brother he hadn't seen in over a decade. Overwhelmed by emotion, Nathan couldn't find the words to respond. He simply nodded as memories from their shared past flooded back. Paul stepped forward, his eyes glistening with tears. "I saw the video of you," Paul said, his voice heavy with regret. "I had no idea things had gotten so bad. I'm sorry I didn't look for you sooner." Nathan's voice quivered as he replied, "It's okay. What matters is that you're here now." The brothers embraced tightly, years of separation and misunderstandings melting away in that single moment. It wasn't just a reunion. It was the restoration of a bond Nathan had once thought lost forever. This profound moment of reconnection marked another step in Nathan's journey. It wasn't just about reclaiming his life, but also about rediscovering the relationships and love that had been missing for so long. Through Barron's act of kindness, Nathan had found not only a new path, but also a new purpose. And the ripple effects of that one gesture continued to touch lives, including his own. As Nathan and Barron's story continued to spread, the kindness challenge became a phenomenon. Not only individuals, but also organizations and businesses joined the movement, finding ways to assist those in need. The Hope Outreach Resource Center received an outpouring of support, enabling them to expand their programs and reach hundreds more like Nathan. But for Nathan, the recognition and praise weren't what mattered most. What truly mattered was that he had rediscovered himself and could now be a source of hope for others. He often recalled Barron's words, "If I help you today, you have to help yourself tomorrow." Those words didn't just change Nathan's life. They became his guiding principle. At a large charity event hosted by the center, Nathan learned that Barron would be attending. When the teenager walked in, Nathan immediately recognized the familiar figure. Barron moved through the crowd with a gentle smile, his demeanor unassuming yet warm, searching for someone specific. Their eyes met, and both smiled. Barron walked over, extending his hand. Nathan took it, his own eyes welling with tears. "I don't know how to thank you," Nathan said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Not just for the money, but for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself." Barron smiled back, his expression full of pride. "You don't need to thank me. You did it all on your own." That evening, Nathan sat in his small office, the light casting a soft glow over a face that had grown less weary with time. Across from him sat a young man, his eyes heavy with despair. Eyes that reminded Nathan of his own not long ago. "Do you think I can start over?" the young man asked, his voice trembling with fear. Nathan smiled warmly, his gaze steady and reassuring. "I believe you can. You just need to believe in yourself. And if there's anyone who believes in you first, let it be me." The young man lifted his head, a faint spark of hope flickering in his eyes. Nathan knew that kindness wasn't just a single act. It was a cycle. Every person given a chance could, in turn, pass that chance on to someone else. Nathan and Barron's story is not just about a $100 bill or a single act of kindness. It's a testament to the power of compassion, the way it can transform a life, ripple through a community, and create meaningful change. Remember, sometimes, even the smallest gesture, a word of encouragement, a compassionate look, can illuminate someone's path. And when we give kindness, it not only touches the hearts of those who receive it, but also enriches our own lives. If this story has moved you, share it. Join the Yadchandra Kindness Challenge and be a part of creating big changes through small acts. Most importantly, remember, you can always be the difference this world needs. Click subscribe to join us in sharing more meaningful stories. Who knows? The next story could be yours.